Good morning, everybody. My name's David Gryn. I program and curate the film section for Art Basel in Miami Beach. And I thought I'd just introduce what I do to get to the next part, which is to introduce Dara Birnbaum to you, which I'm very honored to be in conversation with her. I've done this program for this is the third year, and I program onto the wall of the New World Symphony Center wall. So I'm always thinking about sound and music when I do that. And sort of within the last 2 years, I can't remember exactly the date, but I went to see a show in London at the South London Gallery, which is in Camberwell in the south of London. And there was this show of Arabesque by Dara, which had the music of Clara Schumann in it. And I was entranced because I'm a fan of Clara Schumann. I've known her work for a long time. And it was a wonderful piece. It was 4 screens. And my mind just thought, I can't even think about it because it's a single screen project we do. I can't think about this at all. I have to get it out of my head. I couldn't. When I got to programming this year, galleries submit films, but I also think about films too, and this film was rooted in my mind, and I was thinking, okay, well, maybe there's some aspect of it I could do. So I sort of put forward an email, a phone call. Within a very short time frame, I got a very wonderful answer from a very wonderful person, which I've discovered, my new favorite artist ever, that she was willing to make a 4-screen work into a single-screen projection, which is rare in extreme, but also delightful. I was just so happy. It made my, program feel like I'm grounded. And it's a very unusual thing for someone to be willing to do that. There's often boundaries that get transgressed, and I'm thinking I was doing that. But she was willing to do that. And over the course of this process, we've bonded over emails, and it's been a wonderful experience. What I thought we could do is kick off with that arabesque, and you get to see maybe a couple of minutes of it. It was on last night, and we'll talk about that after you've seen it.
The clip.
Okay. It'll be about a minute. Thank you. Well, Dara, straight into there, we could say, how was it for you last night, seeing it on the big screen? And maybe following on from that, how was it turning 4 screens into 1?
Okay. Was anyone there last night? Okay, thank you for being there. I was surprised. I was told that it's a 7,000 square foot projection area, and even though when I was younger I showed in a lot of clubs that were trying new technologies and big screens, this is so much different because it has a real context of the symphony hall that was designed by Frank Gehry, the New World Center. And what I liked especially was that a lot of my work is based with music and in music. And the arabesque is actually a duel between Robert Schumann's piece that we just heard, and we actually cut the Clara Schumann, but, and watching it kind of echo the inside of the hallway where you're in the public, and a lot of people want to bring their art into public realm. But I thought this was very specific and had a lot of good intentions. Instead of putting like sculpture on the lawn of the gardens of the something, I like this idea of a large screen acting almost like a mirror turned into the center itself. And I thought that David created a really great situation that way. And it was wonderful to be out in the open in the sky. And then with Hendrix, for example, that I did Fire Hendrix, there's cars in it, and then you like the real cars moving by on the outside, and occasionally the shadow of a palm tree adding something to your imagery and making a new montage for you, very special for you. Yeah. So it was a very enjoyable experience. Had a good time.
One of the things I felt, and instead of looking at your work before now, even seeing it last night, was there's a rawness, there's a roughness, there's a punkiness. It was like working with an artist who's very well esteemed and established, but suddenly it felt fresh, it felt raw, it felt very contemporary. But there's also something I noticed, that it felt very much like your work is very much, feels like you make music with your work. There's a repetitions and words repeat themselves. It had a sort of feeling, I feel like there's something about Steve Reich in your work where there's that repetition. Maybe you've gone somewhere where better than where he's gone. I'm happier listening to your film.
Reich, so
anyway,
yeah.
So how does that fit for you, the idea of you making your own music?
Very well, because I started very young. I actually went into architecture before I did art, but I was thinking of going into music very early on and just felt I couldn't make it good enough. But as the musicians I work with tell me, they said, oh, for a video person, you have a very good ear. So I felt that, okay, I can work well with it. But I see things as compositions that have to go together, and all the sense of timing that I think I have that makes the work, even the early appropriated work that might seem very simple and was some of the earliest mashups ever done, like done 30 years before mashups happened, like Kojak Wang. It's like boom, 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 boom. It's very much rhythmical patterns. And I was telling David before that I kind of grew up on pop art, and I think there was a lot of seriality and a lot of repetition, and in minimalist art in a different way, seeing not even right, and seeing things that are silent, like the Solowitz, you know, or this idea of constructing. And I was very involved in the process much more than the product.
The other thing I was very much aware coming into thinking about talking to you, but also watching Clara Schumann, was that idea of your position as a woman and the idea of the role of Clara Schumann in how you filmed her, how you made the film, but also your relationship with feminism and how you feel it works with arabesque.
Well, I think the earliest pieces I did were about two things. They kind of were trying to tackle television as a language, yep. A lot of appropriation, but they were also trying to tackle the image and the stereo role types of women, early from Wonder Woman on. And it's the thing that stayed with me kind of thematically like a red thread, that there was a period where around 1992, I'd say when the Gulf War started, that I could no longer directly relate to politics in my work as I had in Tiananmen Square or Transmission Tower, and was driven back, even before the Clara Schumann, into Erwartung, which I'm pronouncing wrong German, but Schoenberg's opera, written by a woman, to start to get at gender politics again. And I kind of feel I grew up in Berkeley. In the late 60s, early 70s, I was living there, which was a very hotbed of political activism. Part of that activism, of course, was the new feminism that came out.
Because I discovered Clara Schumann when I was in my teens, and no one ever told me about Clara Schumann, didn't know she existed. Then suddenly hearing her music, I suddenly fell in love, and it kind of you made me feel that way again by connecting with your work. It really drew her back, and her relationship. Could you maybe talk a bit about her relationship with her husband and with the film?
Well, the admiration I had was that looking at a woman who introduced her husband and his artwork to the world. And when you see the YouTube people, and if you had seen the installation, 4 channels, keeps going that way, is all quotations from YouTube, appropriation of women basically trying to play arabesque, which is Robert Schumann's. That would never have been heard without Clara Schumann, because she was a very well-known, as many of you might know, pianist, and had fallen in love with Robert at a very early age, and they married, and she had to continue playing. She continued composing. They had, I think, 8 children. She had to add, I don't even know what that's like, I can't imagine, and taking care of all of that and keeping a career going. And the thing that did fall behind is her compositional work. And by taking the 2 compositions, one that Robert wrote for Clara, then Clara's music that you related to, written for Robert, I thought they're both masterpieces in their own right. That the Clara Schumann is as strong as the Robert Schumann work. And that was kind of the equation, to reintroduce her in her own voice, also with a little bit that we didn't see just now, but of her diaries, of how she felt, and then musically how she felt, how she expressed herself.
Yeah. We had with us last night Karen Archie, who curated a wonderful show at the Wilkinson Gallery in London. And, you know, she had sort of celebrating your role at the helm of appropriation. And there are other artists she included, but how do you see that work now going with other artists and their use of the internet and yours too?
Well, like I was saying, it's kind of funny to see everyone doing online, like especially younger people doing like mashups, you know, and me hardly knowing what it was, but the early pieces that we showed last night, like Kojak Wang or Pop-Pop Video, General Hospital, they're kind of 30 years earlier mashups in a way. And I haven't kept up totally with the internet. There's some younger artists, I think, who are very inspired by it, but I've been eating at it. So just the way I ate at television and took imagery, I've kind of been taking imagery from basically YouTube. And I will tell you a short story. It's that the Guggenheim had asked me to go online and say my favorite YouTube videos, and the only thing I could come up with is Bob Dylan. And they showed Bob Dylan, and he was saying, like, we just gave a concert, but the papers all had bad reports on it. And he said, yeah, someone said that a lot of people walked out. And then Dylan says, I heard everyone walked out. And they said, boo. And then he says, and I'm going to walk out. And those are my feelings doing a talk sometimes. I'm just like, okay, who came? How can I talk to you? And not walk out. So
well, everyone's been walking in, not walking out. And at some point very soon, I'm going to ask you if there's anyone here who's thinking of questions. But one of the things we've touched upon, and it is always quite a sort of strange area to talk about within an art fair, but we did talk about it quite a lot at length, is the notion of art and commodity. And, you know, one of the aspects of even showing film is the fact that it needs a voice. And I'm really delighted the way Art Basel works with film and encourages me and Mark Lerder in Basel to do that. And we, you know, it's something we think about and something we've talked about. And I just want to know how you feel, how you fit into that environment. We talked about it, and, you know, I just love to hear your views.
Well, we talked a little about when I started, and I'm getting old enough, I'm 67 now, and I felt it was a very different world in many ways, or maybe I was very different when I was younger and the way I looked at it. But I didn't deal with commodification right away. If anything, I didn't look toward galleries as my role model. My main model was a sense of politically needing to find a voice for women, pretty much. And I hated the voice that was coming at me, and that was the reason for appropriation, that I thought everything was coming one way at me. There were no home recording units, you know, there were no everyone carrying their smartphones, things like that, where you could get immediate information all the time. So I was trying to capture things, throw them back. Give me the rest of your...
The rest of my thinking is just wonderful hearing you say those things, but I, where do you see, when you talk about, we talked about feminism, we talked about, you just brought it up again, how do you feel the territory is today?
Well, for me, I see things in general getting more and more commodified, and it's not something I sit easy with, except that I have to each time say that I'm grateful. I'm grateful to my gallery. I'm grateful to, I'll say it all, like Art Basel for bringing me in. I'm grateful for the ability to re-edit on the price that Art Basel gave me and say, oh, I can make a new statement. But I'm not used to looking at product as much as I am looking at process. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. And I grew up loving the arts. I came to it a little late because, as I said, I was in architecture. I was seeing the earliest work of someone like Trisha Brown and watching someone just break through movement. And at that time, documents weren't even thought of that much, but you couldn't put a price on that performance. Now everything's trying to be priced. Even with appropriation, everything needs a release. I was doing it out of being a pirate, they said, you know, that I'd go in and steal and take and do whatever I could and buy footage like I was buying illegal drugs, because in the United States, that if you were caught stealing from TV, your life could be threatened, you could be put in jail for forever. So my idea was to get that voice in and to do it. But it wasn't as if I was bringing a commodity to people. And I think that even the places I show at sometimes, like I'll take MoMA as the example. I grew up with the original MoMA in New York, and I was in love. But the more I grew and the more the building grew, and the more things have grown, when I enter it, I enter a corporate enterprise in some ways. You know, and I've seen the water lilies by Monet, which when, as a child, I'd sit there and it'd be a panorama, and of course I'm bigger now, but I saw them taken down and put on the first floor, and they looked like a postage stamp. Yeah. You know, so they became an object all of a sudden, where before for me they were a landscape, they were under natural light. So there's a lot of changes going on, and they don't all sit well with me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, just keep going.
Question I did ask you and thought about it still, if there was advice you could give a young artist, what would that be?
Well, I think I've hit the period now we all have where even artists are commodifying themselves, and I won't make names, but that they are almost getting to the point of like Jay-Z at Pace Gallery. And that's not the direction I'm interested in. I teach part-time, master's program. The advice, I'll quote Patti Smith, that Patti Smith said, get out of New York. She's just, and she came to New York to be something. Now she thinks, get out. I'm not so sure moving to Poughkeepsie is going to get you to do better work, you know, but I do think that when a young artist enters a place like New York that has such valuable resources, something, but they have to meet their money and the payment and everything, it's immediately on their mind to objectify their work, to see where it ends up in the marketplace, what it's going to do. That doesn't give a lot of room for growth, for error.
I mean, I lecture students too, and I often think about you as a model, and I know a lot of people out there do that too, but I often think, I'm often asked, how do you make a living out of it? I just say, make the best work. And I've now sort of feel like I am talking to somebody who makes the best work, because I watched your films again last night and they're just wonderful. And I'm going to wrap this up so that we can open up some questions to the audience. But I really have to say thank you for being here. It's just wonderful having you. I'm so pleased to have got to know you. You are indeed a truly wonderful artist, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
How does it work? Is there, do we have mics, or is it? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jessica Schmitz, and I'm a musician, a performer in New York, and I actually work with like Steve Reich and that crowd quite a bit, so it's wonderful to hear you talk about music. So my question is kind of actually for both of you, in curating public performance and public film, how do you go about using music in terms of like, do you curate new work, or do you, approach a composer, or what is that process like?
For me, the whole process of working with the fair, I'm thinking about the city of Miami. The benefit to working with the New World Symphony Center is that it's a symphony center, so I'm thinking about sound the whole time. Thus, when working with Dara was logical. One of the new things we did this year, I worked with a DJ composer called Max Reinhardt, who does Radio 3's Late Junction. He's a world music expert. And I just wanted to create the idea that an art fair could have a soundtrack, that you're sitting out there and sounds can waft over you. It's not just the sounds that you're forced to hear in my elevator at my hotel of disco pop music at 6 in the morning. There may be a sound of my imaginary Miami, the sexy Miami, the one that I fantasize about coming to, which is there, but it's kind of, I think you can maybe recreate that somewhat, but also what kind of sound are you giving back to a city? How do you bring the venue to the art fair? And I know the art fair is very keen on collaborating with the city and things around it, and I've discussed that with them at length, but it's part of my passion too. So sound to me is everything. I select film via sound. So I probably hear a film before I see it. And that's one of the things I was picking up with Dara's work. The more I watched your work at home, preparing to see you and to look at your work, I was so aware of its music. It became musical to me, and I think it had patterns that I hadn't seen at first. I saw something else at first. I also love the roughness of it, because there's so much that's hewn and made smooth. I love something that you can make. I think great art happens in the edge, and it's somewhere where it's rough. It's not so easy when everything's ironed out and made so kind of Gucci-fied, and that's something that I've also found in your work, that I kind of feel like I can really, it takes me in at other levels. That's my music relationship. There's more, but any...
Specifically through the works, I've used sound, always used sound, but used it in different ways. So sometimes it's also appropriated, like Wonder Woman was pretty well known, that at the time I was editing it, I had the radio on, and I heard something come across the radio, which was the Wonder Woman in Discoland band, who I think put out one record on Hippopotamus Records, Wonder Woman in Discoland, and I thought, oh my God, I have the second half, so I appropriated it. But I frequently work collaboratively with musicians as well. Like I remember with Damnation of Faust, being friends with Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth and saying to Kim, like, what are you working on now? Because I really liked her writing, actually, and her lyrics. And she showed me a couple of songs. I told her what I was working on, and they just matched, like went hand in glove, and I thought, can I use it? And her corporations wanted to block some of it, but as a musician, I think that visual artists and musicians have fitted very, very, hand in glove. She said, by all means, we're getting that song to you, Protect Me You. And sometimes I'd, like working on Kojak Wang, turn to Rhys Chatham and say, like, what are you working on right now? And he said, yeah, I like Kojak. Let's try out my guitar trio on Kojak and work that way together. And my delight has been in collaboration with musicians. That's been fantastic.
And tomorrow at the New World Center, there's a Steve Reich concert. And I sort of found that out but when I was programming, I was thinking very much about the program we've decided to play on Saturdays, most of the films have some resonance of sound and music, and all the program does, I think, but specifically after the Reich outdoor concert that anyone can attend, you could stay there and see my program, our program, which I'd be very happy for you to then reflect on how it reflects with what you heard before. And it's a goal to work closer with the New World Centre, somehow.
I wanted to say, too, that, you know, way before MTV, my feeling was that the experiments in music and sound that were happening were fantastic. And video at that time when I started never even had sound equipment in the post-production houses. It only came about, but thank God it came about pre-MTV. And I thought I modeled myself after Godard, who growing up with I loved, and he called his new production house when he went with Mieville Sound and Image. And that was always the most important thing. It's not one or the other, it's both.
Thank you for the question. That was good. Any other questions? Hey?
Thank you. My name is Dawn Leach. I'm from the Academy of Fine Arts in Düsseldorf. And you might remember being at our colloquium from Nan Hoover years and years ago. My question is, you say you do some teaching. The young artists that you teach, are they interested in the 70s videos at all?
Are they interested at all is the problem. Times, sorry. No, some will get very interested. You know, there's actually groupings that are going back, and it's funny because some of it's nostalgia in a way, but the hottest thing a couple of months ago is like getting back to VHS. I don't know how many people remember or have VHS. Hold it on because it's worth something now, because they're trying to say they love the roughness and the rawness of it, and they're getting a little fed up with the hyper smooth high-def image and saying what else can exist. I think out of that idea of being too inundated through a smooth surface, that there's a penetration back into the 70s. What I'd like to see is that the 70s and the 80s open up, because I find that a lot of early 70s work that was mainly performative and then went into the 90s. And I'm a kid from the 80s, so the 80s have been a little pushed out, but I think it's coming back that way. But it's, for me, very important. I think for David, it's very important that when he curates, and I'll let you speak, how to enmesh both,
yeah,
so that there's a historical component.
I'm feeling, with the project we have here, this year we've established that the pods are interactive, and there's over 9 hours of material on them, that all the things I've selected for the 8 hours of programming, plus another hour or two, are being able to be played on the pod. So you can see all of Dara's films on them. That's just an advertisement. But it made me think that when I was thinking about Dara's historic work, so to speak, they're really fresh. But it also made me think we could show a vast volume of archive material at an art fair, because we have this new potential. So we're going to look into what we can do for next year. It's not going to be straightforward. It's not complex free, but the idea that we could possibly show artworks that we all think we know about. I would say I think I know Dara Birnbaum's work, but I really only knew about it really once I started researching, and that I'm going to be meeting and talking with her, because there becomes names that become mantras in our heads. Oh, I know Dara Birnbaum because everyone I meet says they love Dara Birnbaum. Well, I now think I know her better, I know her work better, but it's a way of getting in there. And I think one of the wonderful things that an art fair does is an entry point for many people. Maybe there's many people who come who know a lot, but there's also a lot of people who are just discovering art for the first time. And I think that is the time we have the opportunity to work, with artists, but also institutions and galleries, to show things that we couldn't normally see easily.
Thank you.
wondering whether we can end on that note, because you're all so lovely and we've had a lovely time. So thank you, Dara. I've been so honoured and privileged to be getting to be involved with you, and it's just the start of a journey, I hope.
Yeah, I hope for you too. I mean, I hope there's a long road, and when I was amazed by the number of young people coming. When I came in the wrong entrance or something, and the amount of school children lined up was mind-boggling, you know, and they were really enthused. And I started to, when I first came in, look through their eyes, because my eyes, sometimes you get older, you get a little sedated in a certain way, and they were just clamoring to get in. So
I love that.
Yeah.
And also, just I'm noticing, I see Dara Birnbaum's books. I think there's could you? Can't hear you.
We have 2 publications by Dara's here.
2 publications. There's a wonderful book which I've been studying, and Dara would, if you're wanting to, Dara's willing to sign some of those for you. It's obviously not a command performance, but it's for those who want to, and will be Dara will be honoured to do that for you. So I wanted to thank you all. Thank you, Dara. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks.